Good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. From Turkey, and I welcome everyone from all over the world who are watching this program today to listen Dr. Azzam Al-Tamimi for today's discussion on the Zionist project and the future of Palestine. I'm extremely happy to host Dr. Azzam Al-Tamimi, who has been one of the most authoritative voices and experts on Palestinian issue. He's a Palestinian born in Hebron in 1953, and then situations pushed him to be outside like many of the Palestinians. And he has been to the UK for a long time, where he studied and completed his PhD. And he is author of at least three most important books. One of them, for which he is very much famous, is Rashid Ghannouchi, the moderate Muslim Democrat. And his time with Rashid Ghannouchi has been documented in that book. And this book has become a source of understanding of political Islam. One of most important books which he has authored is about a history of Hamas, some unanswered questions, and then Islam and secularism in the Middle East. He has also been working on Arab diaspora in Europe, and he has been associated with many organizations, research organizations, and has been teaching at many universities. And right now he is also chairman of the Al-Hiwar TV channel and editor-in-chief. So I welcome you, Dr. Azzam Al-Tamimi, in this program. And we have been understanding, and we have been going through a very tough time, very difficult time, in which the issue of Arabs and Palestinians and Israelis have become quite blurred. The narrative of war on terror and the fundamental rights of a Palestinian nation, or the right of Palestinian people to have their state, has been confused. So while the entire world is talking about the right of Israeli state to exist, and the entire Western machinery has been supplying billions of dollars of weapons and support to Israel, Palestinians have been deprived of their fundamental rights, even to stay safe in refugee camps. Almost all refugee camps in Palestine and in Lebanon have been bombed, and more than 45,000 people have been killed so far, and the entire Gaza Strip has been changed into rubble. So this is an unfortunate situation in the Middle East and in Palestinian scenario. We have to understand that the project of Zionist project has become a source of exploitation and misunderstanding about the Palestinian issue and about the Jewish people. Dr. Azzam Tamimi has been writing on this issue for a long time, and his articles, the list of articles which I would like to recommend to our viewers, published and listed in The Guardian and in the Middle East Eye, where he has in detail discussed the issue of Zionist project. And he has been mentioning there that the Zionist project has been instrumentalized for Western interest, and to do something for which Arabs and Palestinians are not responsible. In one of the places he writes, it is a historical fact that most Jews had at time have been opposed to the idea of migrating to the promised land. And then he writes, without the Holocaust, which only a fool or ignorant would deny, Israel, the dream of Zionism, would never have been created without Holocaust. And the Arabs and Palestinians have been forced to pay the price of a crime for which Europeans were responsible. And today we are seeing an extraordinary situation of the Zionist movement all over the world, in which we can notice that at least 267 Jewish billionaires are having $1.7 trillion of economy with more than 100 billionaires in the United States, and then 73 or 75 in Israel and rest of the world. And not just this fact, but also that in this Gaza war, according to a French lawmaker, at least 4,000 French Jews have been fighting with Israel in the Gaza Strip. And according to the Washington Post, thousands of Americans have also gone to fight along with Israeli defense forces. So this transnational character of Zionist movement, that bringing Jews of multiple nationalities to Israel and to fight against Palestinian people, has been noticed in this crisis. And as far as the Palestinian issue is concerned, while we are talking about the right of Israel to exist, we have seen that the borders and the territory of Israeli state has been expanding every day, and the territory of Palestinian state or Palestine has been shrinking every day. If we compare the Palestinian state or the Palestinian land from the 181 partition plan, we can see that today Palestine has more than 160 settlements have been made inside Palestine. More than 200 checkpoints are there, and the ordinary life of Palestinian people have become more and more difficult, almost impractical. And for any observer, we can conclude that the politics or the policy of Israel has been focused on to make the future of Palestinian state almost impossible or unsustainable at least. So according to the maps which Israel has created, now it has become more and more difficult to have a sustainable Palestinian state. And this has started long ago from 1948. So these are the issues and these are the challenges which the Zionist project has been focusing on. And today we are fortunate enough, and we thank you, Sir Dr. Azzam Al-Tamimi, for your time that you have agreed on a very short notice to speak today on this important project subject. So we have among our audience people from South Asia, from the Middle East, from Europe, and from North America, and from all over the world. So I would like to request you to speak for more than 30 to 40 minutes, and then we would like to have some question and answers. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Azzam Al-Tamimi.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. Well, today is the 7th of October, and last year, this day, was really a turning point in the Palestinian cause, or in the course of the Zionist project that we are talking about. One of the things that happened since the 7th of October is that much of the ambiguity maintained for many years about the essence of this conflict has been dissipated, really. More and more people, especially among the young generation, are today more enlightened about what this problem is about and how it started. For many decades, the Zionist propaganda and the propaganda of the supporters of Zionism in the Western world in particular managed to focus on the victimhood of the Jews in Europe as a justification for creating a state for the Jews in Palestine, believed to be a safe haven that would end their suffering, which did indeed exist for many centuries in Europe. So the root of this problem is actually European. It started in Europe. It didn't start in the Middle East. Until nearly until 1948, when the Jewish state was declared in the Palestinian land, the majority of Jews in the Middle East, in what is known as the Middle East, and even beyond the Middle East, in the areas surrounding it, were actually non-Zionist and even opposed to Zionism. And one book that I would strongly recommend in this regard is the autobiography of Avi Shlaim. Avi Shlaim wrote his autobiography. It was published about a year or so ago. And it bears the title, 3 Worlds, Memoirs of an Arab Jew, in which he shows how the Iraqi Jews, of whom he is a descendant, actually coexisted peacefully with the Muslims and the Christians of Iraq for more than 1,000 years, no problem whatsoever, until the Mossad intervened in their lives in Iraq to get them to migrate to Palestine, because Israel, the newly built Israel, was in dire need of a population. So they needed more Jews to come to them. There were not enough Jews migrating, even though the Holocaust drove many Jews to flee Europe, and they were given only one alternative at the time, one option, and that is to go to Palestine. Still, many Jews lived happily in their localities and didn't want to migrate. So the book by Avi Shlaim is an excellent example of how the Jews in the Arab world at least lived. Europe had a problem with the Jews. It's known as the Jewish problem. And the solution to this Jewish problem eventually was found in this idea of establishing a Jewish homeland for the Jews elsewhere. And that elsewhere, from a European Christian perspective, is Palestine and nothing else. Although the founding fathers of Jewish Zionism, which, by the way, was secular and atheist, not religious, because most religious Jews were opposed to Zionism, at least until the beginning of the Second World War in 1939. But the founding fathers of Jewish Zionism believed that probably Argentina would be a much better place for a Jewish homeland. Tudor Herzl himself thought so. He even tried to convince the King of Italy to give them Libya to establish a Jewish homeland. He tried with the British over Cyprus. There was the East Africa proposal as well, because Tudor Herzl and some of his comrades at the time believed Palestine was impossible. Palestine was part of the Islamic Ummah, was part of the Ottoman Empire, and it would be unthinkable that the Muslims would easily give it up. However, it was the rulers of Europe at the time who were mostly Christian Zionists. So you see, Zionism in its origins is Christian and not Jewish. And it goes all the way back to the founding fathers of the Protestant religion, or the Protestant sect, Martin Luther and Calvin, who believed that for the Messiah to come back, to return, the Jews must be sent back to the promised land, and then he'd come, convert them to Christianity, or kill them. So this was actually the essence of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism in Europe was Christian in its origin. Anti-Semitism never existed anywhere in the Muslim lands, because for the Muslims, the Jews are the people of the book, and they have a dhimma, they have a covenant from God and his messenger to be protected and respected. A number of factors came together toward the end of the 19th century into the 20th century that made it possible for the Zionist project to materialize in a homeland for the Jews in Palestine. Now, regarding how the thinking of the founders of the Jewish or Zionist project, is an excellent book I would recommend here by John Rose. It's called The Myths of Zionism. Now, the use of the Bible as a justification is not restricted to those who believed in the Bible, because according to John Rose, the founding fathers of Jewish Zionism were all atheists and didn't believe in God. They didn't believe in the Torah. Yet they used the Torah to justify their project. And the reason for this is that they needed to convince the Jewish people around the world that the Zionist project was actually in their service. Although the Zionist project wasn't in the service of the Jews. It was in the service of the imperialist powers that had an interest in making sure that once the Ottoman Empire was destroyed, that this Muslim Ummah would never have the opportunity to stand on its feet again. And how do you go about this? First, fragment this region, install puppet rulers in these territories that once were part of the Ottoman Caliphate, and then implant right in the heart a colonial outpost under the pretext of providing a safe haven for the persecuted Jews in Europe. Of course, there's no denial that the Jews were persecuted in Europe, but they were not persecuted by my mother. They were not persecuted by my father. They were persecuted by the Russians, by the Eastern Europeans, by the Western Europeans. They persecuted them for a number of reasons. And this led to the Russian pogroms, then the Dreyfus affair, and then to the Holocaust. So this is really the root of the problem. Now, when you want to solve somebody else's problem at the expense of somebody else, the problem only changes in nature, it doesn't disappear. And that's why we have a problem today. Because in order to provide a safe haven for the Jews in my mother's house and on my father's land, I will always be opposed to this project. I will never give up my right and the right of my children and grandchildren to return to their grandparents' lands and homes. And therefore, there will always be a struggle. And this is not unique. It has happened so many times in the history of humanity. In recent history, colonial powers did this to so many nations around the world, in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. And people paid in the millions with their blood and with their life and with their happiness in order to rid themselves of this colonial onslaught. Now, the nature of the colonial project in Palestine is very similar to the one that existed in South Africa. It's not only justifying itself in the name of God, but it is also so racist that it does not see the indigenous population as ordinary human beings. They don't see them as humans. And that's why they easily commit all sorts of crimes against them. That's why there is a genocide going on now in Palestine, and it's extending to Lebanon. And therefore, we can understand from learning about the roots of this conflict that it is another colonial project. And we can learn from studying the projects of liberation movements like in Vietnam, in South Africa, in Algeria, in Afghanistan, and elsewhere, that if you fight for your rights, eventually you will succeed. And eventually the occupying powers will be defeated and they will withdraw. Now, this talk about a Palestinian state, etc., this issue is not about a Palestinian state. The Palestinians never had a state. I myself was born in Hebron, which is part of Palestine, in Al Khalil, but I was born as a Jordanian citizen because after Israel was created in Palestine in 1948, the West Bank became part of Jordan. All these designations, all these names are artificial, colonial, and new. We are part of the Ummah. That's what we want to be. We were part of the rightly guided caliphate when Palestine was taken by the Muslims during the time of Umar ibn Khattab. Palestine continued to be ruled by the Muslims through the Umayyads, through the Abbasids, the Seljukis, even the Fatimids, etc. Only when the Crusaders who came from Europe invaded it, that it fell for a certain number of years to their rule, but then it was liberated again. So it's not about the Palestinian people having a state. We already have more than 22 stupid, silly, failing states in the Arab world. We don't want another one that is dependent on somebody else. Someone like what we today see in the making, although it's not being allowed to come to fruition, even though it is meaningless, the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah, which is really nothing but another security agency working for the occupation. I don't want a state that is not free, that is not independent. I want to be part of the Ummah. I want my mother's house back. I want my father's land back. I want my people to be free from colonial invasion. That's what we want. So the issue in Palestine is not about establishing a state for the Palestinians next to a state for the Jews. The problem is Zionism. Zionism as an ideology believes that the indigenous population are not human beings. They have no right to be in the land. That God, they claim, gave the right to the Jews to take everything for themselves. That the Jews are superior to anybody else. Of course, not all Jews believe in this. There are many Jews who reject Zionism. Actually, there was a time, as I mentioned earlier, when the majority of the Jews in the world were opposed to Zionism. There's an excellent book in this regard by Israel Shahak. It's called Jewish Fundamentalism in Israel. I would strongly recommend it. As well as The Bible and Colonialism by Michael Pryor, another very important reference in this regard. And today, since the 7th of October, we see an increasing number of Jewish young men and women who are dissociating themselves from Zionism and who are saying, not in our name. Only yesterday I returned from Austria, where I attended a conference organized by such a group of Jewish activists who are opposed to Zionism. And I have friends from the Jewish communities, both Orthodox, like the Naturi Karta group, as well as many secularists. Both sides believe that a Zionist state has no right to be in Palestine. So we are actually struggling against Zionism, against racism. This is very similar to the struggle of the black majority in South Africa against the apartheid regime. When the ANC embarked on an armed struggle against the white minority regime in South Africa, eventually the rulers of South Africa went to see Nelson Mandela in his prison cell in Robben Island. And they said to him, come on, Nelson, let's get this over. Do you want a state? We can give you a state somewhere in South Africa. They offered them something, actually, like they offered to Yasser Arafat, where now Mahmoud Abbas considers himself to be the president. Nelson Mandela said, no, this is not the solution. The solution is the end to apartheid, is an end to apartheid. No more racism. Humans are equal in the eyes of God. A white is no better than a black. A red is no better than a yellow. We are all equal in the eyes of God. How come you come from Europe and you claim that this land was given to you by God? It's the same thing in Palestine. When Zionism comes to an end, Muslims, Christians, and Jews can live happily and peacefully, not only in Palestine, but across the region, because the Zionist project in Palestine is causing havoc everywhere. It's been the source of trouble everywhere. Even the Arab revolutions, which were against dictatorship, the Arab revolutions that started in late December 2010 in Tunisia and then moved to Egypt, Syria, Libya, Yemen, and Iraq, it was a cry for freedom, for human dignity. Who stood against it? Not only the dictators that are ruling the Arab world, but also the Zionist rulers of occupied Palestine, because they could see that a free Arab nation will mean an end to the Zionist occupation of Palestine. So there's direct correlation, direct connection between despotism, those corrupt regimes that are ruling the Arab peoples today, and the Zionist project that is occupying Palestine. And it's no wonder that since the 7th of October, some of these Arab regimes have been giving the Zionists every help they need, providing them with vegetables, with fruits, with necessary products, while at the same time participating in the sanctions against the people of Gaza, starving them and denying them medication and denying them a dignified life. So you see, our problem really, if we go back in history, our problem is not with the Jews. This is not a territorial dispute. This was never a dispute between me and my neighbor. This is not a religious dispute. This is not a conflict between Islam and Judaism. This is a Western colonial project that uses a settlement program in order to impose its hegemony on the population. Exactly what the French tried in Algeria. And the French went into Algeria in 1830 and remained there until 1962. It cost the Algerian people 15 million martyrs throughout the struggle that they started about 2 decades before they were completely liberated. And the French annexed Algeria. They considered it to be part of Algeria. They wanted to change not only the people's language, but also the people's culture, the people's religion, if they could do that. This is the nature of settlement colonialism, a great danger to humanity as a whole. And that's why today more people around the world are seeing the struggle for free Palestine as a human struggle, as their own struggle. Because if we allow racism in the form of Zionism to continue to wreak all that havoc in that region, that havoc will be extended elsewhere. And of course, in the Western media, they try to portray this conflict in a variety of ways that are completely untrue, that completely unfair. For instance, in the past, it was Jewish victimhood. Okay, Jewish victimhood, and I want to end Jewish victimhood. But how do we end it? We don't end Jewish victimhood by creating new victimhoods. And then they try to portray it as a conflict with Iran and all these people, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, etc. They are all proxies for Iran. This has nothing to do with Iran. Yes, Iran supports justice in Palestine. Iran has an issue with the Zionists because the Shah, against whom the revolution erupted in 1979, was a Zionist lackey and served the Zionist entity. But this has nothing to do with the real issue here. And the real issue is the occupation of Palestine. The Iranians, like the Pakistanis, like the Turks, like the Indonesians, the Malays, the Nigerians, the Arabs, whoever happens to be Muslim, you have a responsibility to stand by the Palestinians in their just cause, because they are the victims, not because they are Muslims, because they are victims. And we should support the oppressed against the oppressors, wherever that happens, wherever it happens, and irrespective of the religion. Even if the oppressor is a Muslim, I stand against him. So it's justice that we are seeking. So this is actually the essence of this cause. And then what sort of future do we expect in Palestine? We are struggling for a certain future, and we shall not settle for less than that future. And that's the future without Zionism. I'm not here an advocate of a two-state solution or a one-state solution or any of this. The details can be discussed later. As I explained in my book, Hamas Unwritten Chapters, or as in its American edition, Hamas, A History from Within, we can today have a ceasefire. But that ceasefire is not the permanent solution. It's a temporary solution. The permanent solution can be achieved when the Zionists come to us, just like the apartheid authorities in South Africa went to Nelson Mandela, and they said to him, how can we live together in peace? And I was asked this question when my book came out. I was asked by a certain European government if I could meet with some former Israeli politicians who were very interested in the idea I discuss in my book, the idea of a long-term truce or hudna. I said, I don't mind. It's my business, talking and meeting and discussing with people. Ideas need to be discussed. So I met with them and they said, okay, what comes after hudna? Suppose we have a hudna today for 25 years, as Sheikh Ahmad Yassin rahimahullah suggested, or 20 years or whatever. What happens later? I said, look, for peace to really prevail in the long term, you cannot have a racist ideology imposing its hegemony on other people. So if you come to us and say, we are sorry, Palestinians, for what we did to you. We now acknowledge that it was wrong. We shouldn't have occupied your land. We shouldn't have dispossessed you. We shouldn't have done you that harm all these years. We'll say, well, very good. That's a good starting point. End Zionism, renounce Zionism, and we can sit down and talk about a future in which we all live in peace and we can build a common civilization, like the civilization that our Muslim ancestors built, in which there were contributors from all religions. Actually, the main translators of Greek philosophy, of various other ancient philosophies, were either Christian or Jewish, and they were part of the Muslim civilization. We had no problem with people living together and working together as equal, dignified human beings. And this is the future that I look to, or I look for in Palestine, inshallah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Azzam Al-Tamimi, for your insights on the Zionist project. I would like to put few questions, some difficult questions, of course, and for the benefit of our audiences and for the benefit of a larger academic and scholarly community around the world. I think that these questions could be important. So first of all, I think I must congratulate you that you have underlined the fact that there is no fundamental dispute between Islam and Judaism. In fact, you have also underlined that Islam and Judaism have been so much in common and have been cooperating with each other and have supported each other for very long centuries. So that is a good message which has been relayed to the audience. However, when we see the long-term scenario, what I understand is that the Israeli state is there. Israeli people or Jewish people are there. And I think it would be quite difficult to displace these people again or bring them back to Europe or elsewhere, which in my mind, there is a reality that Israeli state is there. And of course, the Palestinian state is not there. So what do you think, what could be the best possible model of coexistence or living together, or having a model in which the interests of Jewish people there and the Arabs and Palestinians can be better secured in that model? Of course, you have suggested one suggestion, that is Hudna, but I think that if we talk about a sustainable model, or if we talk about the long-term model, what comes in your mind, or what do you think about this possible future?
Oh, Hudna is a temporary measure to end the bloodshed, but it's not a long-term solution. I don't really, I'm not in the business of envisaging a model of some sort. I think we had in the past, in history, we had a model, and that's a model of a state in which all these religious communities lived under the rule of law, and they had guarantees of protection of their freedom of worship, freedom of movement, freedom of expression, etc. What I suggest here is that our struggle in Palestine is not against the Jews. and it is not intended to drive anybody out of the land. It is intended to end an ideology that is used as a justification for injustice. Now, once that ideology is renounced, people can sit and talk. This is what happened in South Africa. And then you can have a commission to discuss how we are going to go about compensating the victims, how are we going to go about running the place. That can be done afterwards. Initially, it has to begin with one step, and that is the end of this ideology that is used to justify the occupation of Palestine and the crimes that are being committed against the Palestinian people.
All right. Thank you very much. One more question I would like to ask related to that. And interestingly, the colonialism has been justified by many good ideological points. Sometimes it has been justified in the name of secularism, to bring civilization to the uncivilized people of the third world countries, so far, so on. And similarly, what we notice is that Zionism has been sold in the market in the name of liberalism, in the name of feminism, in the name of bringing reform and modernity and a future of all good things. While the Palestinians or the Palestinian struggle has been defined as dark side of human ideas, regressive ideas, terrorism, and such things. Why as you have already pointed out in your talk, that Zionism is primarily coming or originating from racist, supremacist ideas, which considers that the Palestinians and the indigenous people are not even human. So what do you think that how we are going to have that understanding about Zionism for the global academic institutions? And it is almost impossible as an academician that we attach Zionism with these kind of characteristics or with these kind of features. So the job of academicians and scholars all over the world has become almost impossible to critically analyze the characteristics of Zionism, which you have just described.
Well, the difficulty here is that people feel threatened if they do. It's not because of lack of information or lack of understanding. I think most academicians, they know the history and they understand how things progressed over the past 100 years. It's just that in many academic institutions around the world, especially in the West, if you do not adhere to a certain given, a certain proposition, then you are not welcome. Someone like me, for instance, I am unemployable in any of these academic centers because, oh, how dare you? I mean, they immediately accuse you of being anti-Semitic, of this or that. And many academicians have been intimidated. And those who have challenged the intimidation have lost their jobs. Some of them have lost their jobs, or at least if they don't lose their jobs, they remain under pressure and the freedom is restricted. And I think now people are more courageous. This is likely to change. And it's not really complex. It's very simple. No matter how different people justify their support for Zionism, whether it is in this ideology or that ideology, in this idea or that idea, what matters is really the origin of the problem. The origin of the problem is that Europe wanted to resolve its own problem at our own expense. And they could do this because they had the power, because they occupied us, because they destroyed the Ottoman Empire, of which we were part. And I mean, the Turks should really pride themselves in the sense that we were all their subjects one day. We were all subjects of the Ottoman Sultan. Then when they managed to destroy the Sultanate and had the power to play with the region the way they wanted, they managed to solve the problem they had at our own expense. But now the problem is haunting them back, because our struggle never ceases. It will continue. So I think the challenge for academicians is simply to stand by truth and justice, and to have the courage to do this, irrespective of the consequences of doing so.
Thank you very much. I would like to come back again, one more important question, that is the future of Palestine, and specifically with reference to the famously talked the Abraham Accord. And what do you think that, because two-state solution is almost impossible, it is not that Hamas is not going to accept, whether Hamas accept or not, does not accept, it doesn't matter, but the ground realities are that Israel has made the prospects of two-state solution almost impossible. And then we are now talking about the Abraham Accord. And of course, Abraham Accord has its own limitations. So Abraham Accord has certain support from some Arab quarters, and some Arab countries are not supporting it. What do you think that whether Abraham Accord can take, can bring peace and stability, or can resolve this challenge to some extent?
Well, what is the Abraham Accord? We need to really ask this question to start with. It is no more than a cover for a newly officiated alliance among Zionists in the region. There are Zionists of different colors now in the region. There are Arab Zionists. There are Muslim Zionists. There are Christian Zionists. There are Jewish Zionists. There are atheist Zionists. Those who believe in the idea of Zionism, that is the right of a certain community of Jews to have a country in the land of the Palestinians, these are all Zionists. Whether they are called Muhammad or Ahmad or Mahmoud, it doesn't really matter. So this is what the Abraham Accord is about. The Abraham Accord is about a proclamation by the camp that we call the Zionist camp of their victory after they managed to destroy the Arab revolutions. The Arab revolutions in the streets of Tunisia, Egypt, Syria, Libya, Lebanon, and Iraq, what were they calling for? They were calling for two things. They wanted to bring down that despotic, corrupt regime, and they wanted to liberate Palestine. الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام، الشعب يريد تحرير فلسطين. These were the slogans. And when the counter-revolution, with the funding from the Saudis and the Emiratis, succeeded in bringing down these revolutions, in undermining them, and with the coming of Trump to power, they wanted to celebrate this victory by introducing the Abraham Accords to the world. So the Abraham Accord was an alliance among the Zionists of the region.
Thank you very much. And if I have your permission, I would like to ask the final question. That is, the thing is that we will be easily blamed for exercising anti-Semitism against if we criticize Zionism too much. And even for very general and fundamental human rights, if we voice for clean drinking water for Palestinian people, for the Gazan people, we could be accused of promoting anti-Semite ideas. So what do you think that, how is it possible to have a extremely pro-Palestinian understanding or politics or policy, at the same time to maintain much needed respect and recognition for the Jewish people, of course separating them from Zionism?
Well, as I explained repeatedly, this is not an issue with the Jews. And today we stand with many Jews in the same front, fighting against Zionism, because Zionism originally was Christian and then was espoused by some Jews. We shouldn't be intimidated by the threat of being called names. They can call you a terrorist, so what? Nelson Mandela was called a terrorist. Margaret Thatcher vowed that Nelson Mandela would never be allowed to set foot on British soil. And then eventually when he succeeded and when apartheid was no more, he arrived in London and was given a hero's welcome. So things can change. So if I'm going to be afraid of what they are likely to call me, then I'm going to be subservient to them. I'm going to capitulate, and I'm going to be their slave. And people have a choice. I know. I mean, I cannot expect the same position from everybody. But I can tell you what I believe in. I believe this is not a religious conflict. This is not against the Jews or against the Christians or against anybody because of their religious belief. This is a struggle for justice, a struggle against a racist movement called Zionism. And I refuse to accept any definition of anti-Semitism that would incriminate the struggle against Zionism. I reject it. Okay, some people may accept it. It's up to them. I reject it because with me in the struggle against Zionism, there are so many Jews and they are increasing in number. The majority of the Jews 100 years ago were opposed to Zionism, and probably in a decade or two, the majority of Jews will once again be against Zionism because they can see that today Israel and Zionism are the biggest threats to the Jews of the world, not the Arabs and not the Muslims.
Oh, wonderful. This observation is quite important. You mean that it is the Jewish people who are going to stand against Zionism in coming years?
They will. They are already there. Last year, someone here in the UK organized a tour for me and a rabbi. And it was called the Tour of the Muslim and the Rabbi. And we went, it was in 15 cities across the UK. And unfortunately, many people were afraid to join in. Many people were intimidated into pulling out last minute, but we did it. 15 cities across the UK. A Muslim from Al Khalil, myself, and a rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi from New York. We were both talking about the danger Zionism poses to humanity. And we need to do more of this. And I think the students in American universities today, those who are supporting Palestine, many of them are of Jewish descent. And they are all saying together, not in our name.
Not in our name. Thank you very much, Dr. Azzam Al-Tamimi, for your enlightening discussion today. And we have really in position to understand the difference between the Jewish people's genuine rights and the ideology of Zionism, which does not understand, does not even recognize the rights of indigenous people of Palestine and consider them inhuman or subhuman, and the ideology which originates from racist supremacies and all kind of ideas which Zionism has been promoting. And at the same time, as you have underlined, that the Jewish people are going to stand against this ideology, and eventually there will be a kind of uprising of Jewish people against this oppression and colonial rule. So I think that the way the things which you have suggested in your discussion, that this model of Zionism or colonialism or imperialism is the root cause of Palestinian and Israeli and Palestinian crisis. And if this root cause is not going to be addressed, then the challenge is going to stay there. So it means that all the policy discussions and the political discussions have to be refocused on this single point if there is to achieve a sustainable and just future for Palestine. So thank you very much this evening, and I thank you. I thank IBIR, the Association of Academicians and Authors of the Islamic Countries, Professor Fateh Saushan, who has organized this wonderful dialogue. And I thank all of the audiences who have joined this discussion today. Thank you very much once again. Good evening.